Welcome to Police Beat. My name is Keith Kamig, and I'm the spokesperson for the Gainesville Police Department. Joining me as co-host is Captain Lynn Bink.
Thanks, Keith. We have a very interesting and informative episode for you today. The entire episode is devoted to one topic, a crime that's had a huge impact on our community. I'm talking specifically about alcohol-facilitated sexual batteries. What that boils down to is one person being intoxicated or drugged to the point that they're unable to consent to having sex, but another person has sex with them anyway without coherent, rational consent. Yes, this is a heavy topic, but we got some help from some students and some other citizens in the downtown bar district to assist us with getting these prevention messages out to our viewers. And though I already knew that alcohol-facilitated sexual batteries make up the vast majority of sexual batteries in our town, I was still amazed at the sheer number of people who personally knew someone who was victimized and whose life had changed since the event.
And Lynn, I was also amazed and impressed by the number of people who wanted to come forward and say something on camera about this serious topic. Men and women both had very interesting perspectives on this crime. They were aware of the prevalence of the problem, and they realized that preventing it is the key. Also, you're going to hear from a few local experts about the issues that they face in prosecuting these cases. You'll hear how victims can get help and what a potential victim should do after being sexually battered. Let's now take a look at what some people in our community have to say about this serious issue.
To me, alcohol-facilitated sexual battery means that people take advantage of young girls whenever they've had too much to drink, whether they got to that point on their own or whether somebody else would run the drinks for them.
Yeah, I know of someone who got taken advantage of. It wasn't like he slipped or anything, he just really was wasted and had no clue what was going on.
I had a pretty close friend of mine who was taken advantage of and didn't realize what had happened until later on.
They met the person at the bar. It was one of my friends.
And
they met at the bar.
Exchanged numbers and they went home.
No, they didn't exchange numbers. They just left together.
Well, I got my drink spiked like a few months ago, and it was scary. It was so scary. I didn't remember anything from the night.
One of my very close friends went to a bar that everyone in Gainesville has probably been to, and she woke up in some guy's bedroom, and actually, without her clothes on, and pretty much was raped.
I've heard of a couple of girls have been taken advantage of while they were drunk, and it affected them deeply.
It's just a tragedy because they get to the point where they're so inebriated that they don't know what they're doing or what they're agreeing to do, and before they know it, they're scarred for the rest of their life.
Before I even turned 21, I was at a local bar downtown, and I set my drink down just for a brief moment, and when I picked my drink back up, I had one more drink that night, and the next thing I knew, I was waking up in some guy's bedroom. I was left by my girlfriend who had been out with me, and my life has never been the same since.
As you know, we are an area that has many, many students. And as a result, we have many young people who come to this area, and for the first time, they're free. For the first time, they can make their own decisions. And sometimes their judgment is impaired, and they make decisions that put them in danger. And right now, unfortunately for us, we do see many of these decisions lead down the path of sexual battery, which is a crime that occurs predominantly to women, but men can also be victims, where there is sexual contact or penetration without consent, sometimes violent, but many times not violent, but traumatic.
We work with a lot of victims who were raped while they were drinking, while they were very intoxicated. In the college age, it's a common practice to binge drink, to consume a lot of alcohol in a short amount of time, the intention of, just kind of partying and have a good time, but that does leave the person who's drinking very vulnerable to someone who's just looking for the opportunity. So we work with a lot of young people, college-age people that are victims of alcohol-facilitated rape.
Nationwide, it's estimated that between 70 and 75% of sexual batteries that occur among college students are involving alcohol.
Most of the sexual battery cases that we investigate involve alcohol or some type of drug. And when I say most, I mean literally 95%. We have a lot of young students who engage in drinking and other recreational drugs, and that always is a perfect opportunity for this kind of crime to occur.
We know that so many of the sexual batteries involve alcohol and involve someone that the victim knew. It might not be someone they were actually dating, but it's someone they knew. It's some sort of familial relationship that causes the victim to have a trust relationship with someone that they might not know, but that they know of. And so what happens is when alcohol is involved, it makes the victim a whole lot more vulnerable to be a victim of sexual battery. What we expect a victim to encounter is, first, there should be a victim advocate involved. And a victim advocate is there for the victim.
I'm Laura Kalt. I'm a victim advocate counselor with Alachua County Victim Services and Rape Crisis Center. We provide services to victims of crime. We have a Rape Crisis Center component of our program, so I work with rape victims during that initial reporting phase. Sometimes they're calling our office first before they even call law enforcement. They're wanting to know what their options are. They're just wanting to talk to somebody and even talk through what they've experienced and understand, is it rape? And they're just needing someone to talk to, they're needing some counseling. So we offer individual counseling, support groups as well, all of the support services that would be helpful for someone dealing with rape, whether it just happened or it happened many years ago.
My name's Tanya Vanderveen. I'm a victim advocate at the University of Florida Police Department, and my job is to assist victims of crime on the University of Florida campus and also to provide victim advocacy services to any students, faculty, or staff members who are victims of crime, regardless of the location of the crime. So any students who come to my office, needing services, we're always going to help. I wish that people would seek some sort of services, get help in some way. They would talk to a victim advocate and find out what options they have, whether it's making a police report or even just finding out what counseling options or what other healthcare options they might have to help start healing instead of sitting in silence. Reaching out and getting some sort of help so that they're not having to try and figure things out on their own, or that they're not suffering by themselves, that they're getting support and assistance from other people who have experience with supporting people who are victims of sexual violence.
We hope you found that information helpful. When we return, we're going to continue our look at this issue.
Police Beat, brought to you by GRU. More than energy? Information on all our services can be found at GRU.com or 334-3400.
Welcome back to Police Beat. Let us now continue our look at the social and criminal problem of alcohol-facilitated rape.
Ideally, what we want victims of sexual batteries to do is to report immediately to the police, although we do understand that sometimes there are issues with that.
Most people who suffer after a traumatic event such as a sexual battery are ashamed, embarrassed, fearful of retaliation, intimidated.
Most rape victims are raped by someone that they know. So it's just that initial shock and disbelief that this even happened, someone that they know has done this to them. And then there's the question of, will I be believed? There's a normal response to go through, what did I do to cause this? To feel guilt, to feel shame. It's embarrassing to talk about with anyone, let alone to strangers at the police department or at the hospital.
I think that students are afraid of reporting. They've seen bad publicity and they think, gosh, if I report to the police, I'm going to be, my name's going to get in the media, people are going to judge me, they're not going to believe me, and it's going to impact their life in a way that they're afraid is going to be, even more negative than what they've already experienced.
Well, sometimes victims are apprehensive about coming forward because of behaviors they engaged in prior to the rape. Maybe they were using drugs or alcohol. There was something they were doing that they know might get them in trouble. So that's what's keeping them from coming forward. We want to reassure those victims that those things will not be used against them. What's more important for law enforcement is that the victim of a rape come forward and talk about what's happened to them.
Another thing that I find is that students feel like they have to have the evidence to give to the police, and so they feel like, well, I don't have any proof that I can give, you know, it's just going to be my word against his, so the police aren't going to be able to do anything to help because I don't have proof. You know, and students will sometimes, I think, try and even, you know, be their own detective, you know, trying to make their own case before they would come to law enforcement, not really understanding that that's what law enforcement does, is they investigate crimes, and so it's not upon them to necessarily have to prove their own case.
There's a myth out there that if you don't report immediately that, you know, there's no case. That's not necessarily true. We do lose some evidence if we don't get it gained in the beginning, but just because you don't immediately call law enforcement doesn't mean that there's not anything that we can do to help you with the case. So by all means, if you ever are the victim of this type of crime and, you know, do want to contact law enforcement, even if some period of time has lapsed, certainly call us and we'll help you out with whatever we can.
We've had some great legislation that was passed last year that allows rape victims to have a forensic exam done for free without reporting it to law enforcement. So they can go to the hospital, get the forensic exam done as long as it's within 4 days of when the rape occurred. And they can go and get that done, and they have 3 months to decide if they want to report it to police. And in the meantime, the advocates can be working with that victim, offering that counseling and really helping that person maybe get to a place where they're ready to talk to police.
Late reporting is very common. A lot of times victims wake up the next morning or that afternoon and they're not sure what happened. They might not have their memory intact. They may be too traumatized to remember. So calling law enforcement late does not mean that you can't report. You can call at any point in the process. You can call the next day, the next evening, the day after, the week after, the month after. Please report. That by no means the defendant can't be held responsible.
It's also important for victims to know that reporting does not mean that we are going to go through the entire court process. There are many times in the court process when the victim has the opportunity to state his or her view on how the case should be handled. And there are many, many alternatives to trial and the potential sanction of incarceration. So victims need to know that it's important to report promptly, to report accurately, and to allow the system to take that information and do with it what it needs to do to protect other members of the community.
Unless a victim reports, the defendant cannot be held accountable. The batterer cannot be held accountable. And she might not know it at the time, but this might be someone who has done this in the past or who's going to do this in the future. And so it's important that we are able to hold the batterer accountable so that other women are safe.
So if I could say one thing to victims, it's very important if this type of crime occurs to you that you report promptly so that we could collect both the physical evidence, take your statement, and follow up on the information you provide to us to identify a perpetrator and go forward with a criminal case if necessary. Under both the Florida and United States Constitutions, a defendant is innocent until proven guilty of any crime. And in the case of sexual battery, a defendant would be entitled to have all of those rights attended to him.
And it's the state's burden to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that he committed the crime of sexual battery. So what we can do at the State Attorney's Office is prepare the victim for cross-examination. We can practice. We can talk about different scenarios, but ultimately, I think the best advice to give victims is be truthful about every detail, no matter how insignificant the detail may seem at the time. Because as long as the victim has given consistent responses throughout the investigation and throughout the prosecution, that's one less thing that the defense can use during cross-examination.
The investigation of an alcohol-facilitated sexual battery requires the collaboration of many different people, many different agencies to make sure that we get the best investigation brought forward for prosecution. I would say that our community is very, very fortunate, and I am honored to work with the people here in Alachua County, at Santa Fe, at the university, in preparing victims for whatever might come forward for them in the criminal process.
After the break, we'll return with more information from some local young people as we dig deeper into the problem of alcohol-facilitated rape in Gainesville.
So, you went out with a friend last night. Did you have fun? Do you remember? Did you have one drink too many? Or maybe two? Do you know? Did you think you were cool? Do you remember what happened? Who brought you home? What's being posted online today? Binge drinking. You're smarter than that. This message is brought to you by HIT and its sponsors.
Welcome back to Police Beat. We now would like to continue our look into the issue of alcohol-facilitated rape. I can only hope that as both men and women continue to watch this segment, they will make the conscious decision to not take part in this crime, and even more importantly, to help women so they don't have to ever deal with becoming a victim. Let's now go back out and listen to some powerful statements, as well as some great advice to keep yourself and your friends safe.
I do hope we continue to dispel the myths that are out there about rape victims and how they react and how they respond.
Many myths include that victims are traumatized physically, that victims immediately call law enforcement, that victims have no difficulty in reporting what has occurred to them. Those are myths.
The myth of alcohol lessening the penalty, that's not true. There is no de-enhancement in the crime, that if the victim was intoxicated or voluntarily intoxicated, that it wasn't sexual battery.
A stranger rape and an acquaintance rape is not held to any different standard in the courts. I mean, rape is a rape is a rape, and it's looked at that way in the court system and in the criminal justice system.
One of the things that I think I would like to share with the young women of this community, that it is okay to have fun, it's okay to enjoy yourself, but pay attention to where you are, your environment. Be aware, and not only be aware of your own self and your own behaviors, but pay attention to the other women around you.
I'd like to encourage women in the community to stick up for each other and look out for each other.
Absolutely always have an eye on your drink. Like, have your drink in front of you, have your drink, like if you've walked away from your drink and you come back, don't touch it.
Don't take drinks from people you don't know, or go up to the bar with them, because the mistake that I made was, like, I didn't go with him to get the drink. I just stood there and, like, waited for the drink to come, and I didn't see what he did to it.
Keep your finger over the top of your beer. Don't put your drink down. If you do, spend an extra $4 and get another drink, because it's not worth it. And never go out without a girlfriend that you can trust will be there with you no matter what. That will never leave your side, even if you want to be with the guy, because you never know what their intentions are, and unless you are level-minded, you can't make the decision for yourself.
I never go out with less than 2 people, and so, like, if one person is getting drunk, at least you have 2 other people that can be there to protect her against someone else.
The buddy system. If you're going to go out with your girlfriends, go out with your girlfriends and make sure that you all know where each other is.
We always try to have a meeting place where if you get lost, to meet there. And we always make sure, if we don't have our phones, that we have each other's phone numbers written on our hands. If we don't know them by heart.
Don't let your girlfriends go off by themselves.
Even if somebody is saying, oh no, I want to stay here, I don't want to go home, either you make them come with you or you stay until everybody's ready to leave together, because in my experience, things always end up going wrong when somebody gets left alone.
It's important that we trust our instinct. If something doesn't feel right about someone, even though it's a friend of a friend, don't go with that person. Don't get in the car and take a ride home from the party with that person. Don't worry about appearing rude. I've heard a lot of women say that too. Well, I didn't want to be rude, so I went with him.
And then I would also say, don't be afraid to get involved. You know, if you see something that you don't feel right about, tell somebody or go get help or intervene.
Take care of the people around you, even the people you may not know personally. Because that little favor, that telephone call, that urging and encouragement of a friend may actually save them from a terribly traumatic experience.
And if you wake up somewhere and you're not sure where you are or what happened, immediately call law enforcement, call a victim advocate, call a good friend, make sure you're safe. My advice to guys out there is don't get yourself in this position.
Why take a chance? Why put your life at risk? These charges are very serious. They bring with them the possibility of state prison incarceration.
You know, if you've just met somebody at a party and you guys have both been drinking and you think you want to hook up, it's not worth it to take the chance that you wake up the next morning and the person that you hooked up with feels as though you've taken advantage of them or feels as though they've been raped. It's not worth it.
Take a step back and think about what you're doing and make sure that, you know, both parties are consenting.
If you're at all unclear, go no farther.
Wait, get her number, call her later, and, you know, actually go on a date or do something, you know, to where you can actually establish a relationship and maybe feel good about that later. You know, instead of taking advantage of a situation that seems easy and then having significant repercussions later for both you and for that other person.
Don't risk the possibility of being incarcerated. Don't drink too much. Don't push. Be careful and treat women with respect and dignity. And I guarantee you, you'll never meet me, because you'll never need to have to go through the criminal justice system.
Guys who would have sex with highly intoxicated, inebriated females are sick, desperate, I would say.
A guy who would do that is a total scumbag.
Coward. Insecure.
He's a horrible person.
Feel they were pretty low class to me.
They need to go to jail. I think it's desperate, sad, and it's unnecessary.
I think that no girl is going to be with a guy that is going to stoop to that level. It's extremely low of them to do.
If I knew of a girl who's getting taken advantage of by a guy because she'd had too much to drink, I would probably become a completely different person.
Well, first of all, I would tell them that it's wrong and illegal.
Obviously, I'd try and stop that or prevent it in some way, because obviously that's not a from my culture, that's not a gentlemanly way of dealing with ladies.
If the girl's passed out, you should see if she's all right, first of all. Doesn't mean you can take advantage of her at all.
I'd give them a little knuckle sandwich, you know. Can't have that. Can't have guys taking advantage of drunk girls, you know. They're different. I have a couple of sisters, and I wouldn't want nobody to do it to my sister. So, good old knuckle sandwich.
I think how guys think about things is, you know, she's drunk, she's not really all there. Let me just have my way with her, see what happens. You know, she probably won't even remember. Let's just have a good time. And if anything, just blame it on the fact that she was drunk, and it's placing blame on the victim where it shouldn't be placed.
Just because you're voluntarily intoxicated does not give your consent to sexual battery. No means no. Not being able to say no means no. Being too drunk to say no means no.
I do also want to say that it's never the victim's fault. Just like if I were to leave my front door unlocked and someone burglarizes my home, it does not mean that the burglary didn't happen, that we shouldn't hold the person accountable that robbed my home. The same is true for alcohol-facilitated rape. We emphasize that we need to be cautious when we go out to parties or drinking, but at the same time, if it does happen, it's never the victim's fault.
Well, I think the common denominator is the alcohol or the recreational drugs, and so I would tell people not to consume so much. I mean, you can have a good time and still be conscious and aware of your surroundings and be able to consent or not consent to sex. So that's what I would tell people, is that, you know, just don't overdo it.
Yeah, I think it's a community effort that will make a difference in our young people, and our young people understanding that when they go out and they party and they drink, that there could be really horrible consequences to that.
I think that education is a big part of it. You know, raising awareness about the fact that it's not okay. You know, it's not okay to take advantage of somebody who's been drinking. You know, even if you've been drinking too, that's not okay. You know, having sex with somebody without their consent is a crime. So I think that it's kind of a cultural education about, you know, respecting those boundaries and respecting, you know, the fact that people have the right to decide what happens with their bodies, men and women. You know, we have the right to decide when we have sex and when we don't have sex, and or what drugs we're ingesting and things like those. We have the right to control our bodies.
I think the university's effort to talk about binge drinking and to talk about how alcohol really plays a part in a lot of negative consequences, I think all of it combined can make a difference in reducing alcohol-facilitated rapes.
As you saw during this episode, there are many people who are very aware of this issue, and they took the time to help us get the message out about their feelings on the matter or to see it from their perspective. As I and others have said during this episode, these rapes make up a large number of the rapes reported to us. If women and men, especially men, speak out or just relay their feelings on the matter through their own actions, I believe our community will see a difference. Education and awareness is the key. Young men are going to jail and having their futures impacted because of very bad decisions, and women are being forced to live with a variety of feelings and trauma after these brief episodes. People are letting excessive amounts of alcohol ruin their lives. It can be prevented, and we hope everyone will do their part to make that happen. Thanks again to all the people who agreed to speak to us and to our resident experts for giving us such good information.
Well, we hope you enjoyed our show today and would like to let you know that we can be reached at our website, www.gainesvillepd.org, for any comments about our TV show. But if you'd like to talk to us live, you can tune into the Police Beat radio show every Sunday morning from 10 to 11 on the Sky 97.3.
And again, thank you for joining us today, and I invite you to join us again next month for a new episode of Police Beat.
Police Beat, brought to you by GRU. More than energy? Information on all our services can be found at GRU.com or 334-3400.